welcome to the mini-conference BIPoC in classical music. It gives us the chance to invite people like you, program planners and concert planners, like orchestras and other concert halls, festivals, interesting initiatives and agencies. It's quite a powerful circle sitting here. We all determine who is present on stage, which repertoire is present on stage, and how. So actually that makes us the gatekeepers of the classical concert and also its future. That's a powerful position, and to my mind, with power, there comes responsibility. So we dearly should try to understand the mechanisms of power and of old power too, because it still determines the structures of our sector, right, of our music sector, classical music sector. So that's why we're here today. We need to question the structures in our work. Thank you for being here. Please welcome our moderator and master of ceremony, Roger Wilson.
So thank you, good afternoon, and welcome to this fantastic event, courtesy of Dorothy Kalpen and her wonderful team here at Konzerthaus Berlin. My name is Roger Wilson, and I'm co-founder of an organization called Black Lives in Music. We're based in the United Kingdom and work with over 100 partners, as well as working internationally as we are here today. Before I speak some more on our work and the reason why we're here today, I want to say a big thank you for being here, but also for allowing me to be here and leading this event while speaking the English language. While I continue to be amazed at the linguistic skills of those attending events like this one today, the gift of being able to cross international borders without changing the language you speak continues to be a pampered privilege for relatively very few of us. So while I have maxed out my Duolingo account and I've learned a few rudimentary sentences, I'm afraid today I'm limited to saying bonjour et bienvenue, guten Tag und willkommen, and yes, good afternoon and welcome. So as well as myself, you will hear from two wonderful guests, both with very powerful testimonies to share in the narrative of transformational change. Before I introduce them to you, I'd like to talk a little bit about why we're here today. There can be no doubt from prima facie evidence that representation in classical music was and continues to be a problem. In the UK alone, black people playing in orchestras still makes up less than 2% of the orchestral workforce, and in conservatoires, under 3% of teaching staff are black, Asian, or ethnically diverse. In the US, black musicians represent 2.4% of the orchestral workforce, and believe it or not, this is a 0.5% increase on their previous findings in 2014. Yes, that's a whole 10 years before. The workforce and wider classical music community is monolithic in culture, and here in Germany it appears to be no different. Back in May of 1924, the day before he was to perform at this very venue, the black American tenor Roland Hayes heard that angry protesters had stormed the American embassy. They demanded that the embassy forbid Hayes from performing in their city. It was suggested that his performance would most assuredly remind Germans of the Black Horror on the Rhine, a term used to describe the French colonial troops who occupied Western Germany after the end of World War I. Sure enough, as he ascended onto the stage and faced the audience, Berliners began to boo loudly. In spite of the noise, Hayes began to sing a lullaby by the Viennese composer Franz Schubert. The audience gradually became quiet. After the last notes of the lullaby had slowly drifted into silence, the audience burst into applause. By the end of the evening, newspapers reported Hayes had stolen Berliners' hearts. That, of course, is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the story of black and indigenous people of color in German classical music. The Afro-Caribbean conductor Rudolf Dunbar led the Berlin Philharmonic in one of its first concerts after World War II, and Paul Robeson sang folk songs at Humboldt University in East Germany as early as 1960. Yes, with this rich history of some of the great black artists of classical music, the black community seemingly continue to be outliers of the art form, pretty much wherever you go. So this brings me to the question entitling my keynote today. If the problem continues to exist, then we must be proactive to level the playing field of inequality and for everyone. But who are we in that sentence? Who are the people who should be helping to drive transformational change in this art form shackled by the very fetters of tradition? I must ask, if not us, then who will bring this change? Our own organisation, Black Lives in Music, is in its 5th year. We've been working at the front line of the industry to help bring about change, to enable and empower, to support people with aspirations of joining and progressing in this sector. We believe in 4 very definite pillars of work. They are governance, recruitment, artistic programming, and lastly, marketing and communications. We believe that the successful achievement of the first 3 pillars is crucial if a wider audience is to be reached through the marketing communications function, the 4th pillar mentioned. Most essentially, we're not talking about orchestras and performers as though they are cut from a different cloth from normal human beings. They are the same as the very people who give their very existence value. We are, of course, talking about the audience. And when I say the audience, I mean those that we know and realize as the present and established stakeholder group for classical music. But also, there are those that are not yet reached and engaged as today's audience, or even tomorrow's, as of course they should be. Some of those in the latter category are those who have presently no connection with classical music. This is because they either have no connection with the art form, or perhaps they do like the music but cannot access it in any way on economic grounds. Equally, they may be that group of people who love to stream classical music but have no idea who they may be listening to. Well, they may well be streaming classical music, but they are not going to the concert halls to have the ultimate experience of feeling live classical music in glorious 4D. Those of us who have experienced the unparalleled sonic beauty of the full tonal palette produced by a live 65-piece orchestra know exactly what I mean. So, the musicians, the management, the established audiences, consumers of music via digital downloads, and those who do not have any connection with classical music at all, are they not all one community? My belief is, if we actually start to think about this group of people in the context of a community, and we really dig down into the definition and values of the word, then we may at last begin to break down the walls and free ourselves of those very shackles of tradition I mentioned earlier. For me, and at the center of this thinking, is relevance. What does classical music mean to our community? And if the answer to that question for so many people is nothing, then we should question our modus operandi, yes, the way we do things. So many people in our wider community can access other genres of music, but yet for so many classical music remains uncharted territory. This latter group neither finds the music relevant, nor in so many ways do they viscerally connect with the main stakeholders, the performers. The role models for so many people are simply not there. The people who look different, the people who look like me, talk differently, feel different. Additionally, there are those without money unable to access music of this genre in any way other than walking past buildings such as this very beautiful Konzerthaus where we are today. I mentioned earlier the word privilege, and I can't think of a better word to sum up the advantage that so many people have over others in the context of the community that can access classical music in this way today. So where does the responsibility lie? Well, in South Africa, the black community have a concept called Ubuntu, translated as I am because you are. For me, this sums up who, when, where, when, and how we need to change. The responsibility is on all of us as individuals to mobilize and become active in ensuring that our music is exactly that, our music. We can't keep our music for some people and not share it with others. It's so important that we all understand. We all have power and influence. And that power and influence can bring about change. These two facets are not exclusive to those with authority and mandate. In fact, with a sense of our own power and influence, we can in fact create our own sense of authority and anoint ourselves with a mandate to drive change. After all, in the process of building considerable and expansive empires across the world, some folks have been doing this since time began. And for clarity, when I say we, I don't just refer to orchestras liberating their thinking on classical music and driving a narrative of change, but I think of a real community, an ecosystem that currently exists. Yes, I'm talking about orchestras, but equally of conservatoires of music, first access to music education, instrumental music learning, the musicians' union, examination boards, promoters, venues, all and more exercise a historically conservative approach, and one that fails to acknowledge and see so many members of our community. If this music is to survive, that wider community must reclaim classical music for themselves. It was, after all, the people's music back in the day, the popular music of the moment, shared and enjoyed by so many more people in our community. Those forms of dance, contemporary in the moment, the movement of the people, whether a courante, a volta, a tango, or a waltz, they all influence classical music as we know it. And yet hip-hop, breakdancing, jazz dance, so many other fantastic forms of dance from around the world today remain outliers of classical music, both in presence and influence. This is an example of the lack of relevance of which I speak, and a lack of connection with the contemporary aspect of a modern ecosystem which will preserve the art form in our culture, not kill it. We must open our eyes, be brave, bold, and embrace the art form in the context of the world in which we live today. And for those of us with privilege, we must keep the door open and welcome others without. We must be affirmative in our actions, champion individuals, young and old, welcome them as practitioners and welcome them as our audience. We must acknowledge humility and learn from this wider group of people in order for classical music to survive, evolve, and become relevant. I've mentioned some important words already, including privilege, humility, influence, and relevance. These are all traits that should resonate with the individual, every single person here. We have the near complete toolkit to drive change, but the one thing missing, desire. Without this key aspect, we cannot and will not ever make the change that is needed. And I fear classical music will subsequently become an increasingly existential subject. However, my belief is that change is now inevitable. For some time, I wasn't sure of this, but now I'm pretty convinced. There can be no turning back. This change of tidal movement began relatively recently in the last few years with brave and brilliant orchestras like Chineke, who we'll hear later tonight. The consciousness that developed with the heinous murder of George Floyd and the subsequent mobilization of the Black Lives Matter movement. You should note that I'm talking about important change that has started with and has been driven by people. This is the key. To many, this catalyst for change and key ingredient is obvious. As I asked the question at the beginning of this presentation, if not us, then who? Equally, I must ask the question, if not now, then when? Thank you. No, thank you. So look, our next guest speaker is a French-German scholar and dramaturg. She's a violinist, academic, and founder of the award-winning String Orchestra. This ensemble was established to perform works by BIPoC members that have been erased from a canonical musical historiography and a standardized concert repertoire. She's currently lecturing at Berlin Universität der Kunst, and she is, of course, I say of course, she's got 2 doctors. She's got 2 doctorates. 2 doctorates. I have to call her doctor. She insists, actually. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to the stage now Dr. Danielle G. Dowd. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fantastic introduction. And thank you, Roger. Thank you, Konzerthaus and Dorothee, and all this fantastic team. Today, I will talk about certain aspects of producing classical music in Germany. This is a huge topic, so of course I cannot do everything, but just for you to know, this is a few things. Last week, Berlin witnessed a historical moment. So millions of people were celebrating 35 years of the fall of the Berlin Wall at Brandenburger Tor. And a few meters next to the celebrations, the Haus der Kultur und der Welt was hosting the conference already there, curated by composers and scholar George A. Lewis. So this conference was historic in many ways. During a full week, composers, scholars came together from different countries, different generations, and different families. First, to address the myth of absence of Black composers and interpreters in music history, in programming, curating. Second, to acknowledge the multiple musical practices and connect scholars with composers, which is also a very important thing to do. And third, to reflect the academic production of knowledge as well as the systemic exclusion of a Black composer from concert and opera repertoires, curricula, etc., etc. So now we are here standing in beautiful Konzerthaus, next to Musikhochschule Hans Eisler, when I've been also learning opera direction, and next to Boulez-Saal and to Staatsoper and Komische Oper. So we are in the heart of the music in Berlin. So, knowing this, Konzerthaus have been managing and curating a lot of programs. I think it was one of the first houses to have a program for sogenannte Musikvermittlung for over 30 years, before it became a new sheet. So Konzerthaus is actually a very important actor. And so things are moving slowly. This year we have Shiku Kanemason as an artist in residence. We will hear this evening Chineke Orchestra, conducted by Kevin Janeduse and founded by Chichin Wanuku, 2015. We will listen to a fantastic pianist, Isata Kanemason, playing Prokofiev, to a young composer, Derek Sky. I hope I'm okay with the pronunciation. I'm sorry if not. I'm French. Brian Raphael Neighbor, so I'm allowed to do so. And next year, Ayana Whittle-Johnson will also be here. So we have a great program. Something is happening. But is it unfortunately not the norm? So it's pretty exceptional what is happening here. So today, I'd like to outline 4 steps from the actual status quo to a sustainable change in programming and curating BIPoC, Black, Indigenous, people of color composers in Germany. So 1, status quo in Germany. So I would like to list some of the most popular narrative in the music practice and music production in Germany. So the first one, it's my highlight, is the canon and the myth of quality. So Frank Henschel wrote this beautiful book 2006 called Bürgerliche Musik und Ideologie, I hope the title is right, which is his Habilitationsschrift. And he was explaining how the myth of how experts came out from the 18th century, late 18th century, and how the bourgeoisie came up to dignify from the aristocrats art to talk and to judge about music. And this myth of quality is pretty present nowadays. So the reason number one not to play black composer, indigenous composer of color is quality, so in the German discourse, which is a very important one. I will come back to this. Second, no, it's not second, still part of the canon. So, well, yes, the inexistence of composers, so which we know it's not the case. So I wrote Kishidou and Lewis, both. So Harald Kishidou and George A. Lewis were scholars, and they wrote this fantastic book last year called Composing While Black in German and in English. About most contemporary classical music played by black composers. So George Lewis has been a pioneer from the 70s to until now, and working also with the Fluxus and Ben Patterson. He's a very important composer for classical, contemporary classical music. And Harald Kishidou is here in, I think, in Hamburg, musicologist. Still part of the canon is the hearing blackness. This is also one of my favorites. Kira Thurman, a great musicologist and colleague of mine, wrote this fantastic book, Singing Like German. I can recommend this book. It's very well documented, and also the case from Hayes you were talking about, Roger, is also in it. So there were, so Thurman is explaining the story of some musicians from the most 19th and 20th century in Germany, starting from the Cuban trio playing for Wagner's birthday to several touring vocal and instrumental group in the early and mid of 19th century. And also analyzing the discourses of the critics who are hearing blackness, which was also a very interesting topic. And this topic is actually not gone yet, sadly, but it has a history in Germany, and it would be important to have a look at his history. Second, expertise by a white cis male has been seen as neutral, scientific, non-biased, most for musicology and programming. I think doesn't need any more explanation. The last one is used to be huge. I hope it will get less, but blackness was associated with USA and jazz. So you have to play American music or jazz music or both if you are a classical musician. So this is the main narrative in Germany. Now knowing this, we come to the diversity politic. Diversity politic in Germany is probably different as in French or in the UK, but you have also here some very clear narrative. So number one, my favorite, tokenism. So you take one person, you put the one person in the institution, and okay, the job is done. Of course, it doesn't work like this. First of all, you need a full team behind a concept and behind a program to move anything. But this is what is practiced not only in music, also in theater and museum. So you put the the black person there who is alone and will probably suffer a lot of not nice everyday racism, but at least you have the cover for diversity. Second, crossover. This is also something who is very loved by concerthouses, like making Beethoven and hip-hop, and Mozart and Arab music. This is something which is, I know I'm talking to a lot of institutions here who are practicing this. This might be fun for a while, but is a problem what is the only narratives. Third, folklorism. This is actually a declination of the crossover. So the declination is more inviting a group to play in traditional costume, in traditional instruments, and in beautiful places, and then talk about the beautiful instrument and then beautiful costumes. Also nice, but it doesn't help to move things consistently. Fourth, hiring incompetent diversity agents who then are actually forced to are stealing the work of black scholars and erasing them by never naming the sources. So this is a very concrete case. The politic of the diversity politic have been not taken seriously for a very, very long time. So in Berlin, we have the 360 Gramm from Kulturstiftung des Bundes from 2018, just correct me if I'm wrong, 2018 to 2025. So the Kulturstiftung des Bundes would pay some money to museum, to theater, to concerthouses, to work on the diversity. So some, not all, but some houses would then have diversity agents who were there to beraten. Consult, thank you very much, as a consulting function. So not really with a power, but a consulting function depending on the team. They will be in the team or not. And I have this case, this very interesting case. You might have heard it, 2021, 2022, 2024, 2023. International ist nicht divers. It was like very high in the diversity bubble. So this is actually a concept I developed 2020 by my first interview. Of course, 2020, as Josh said, with the murder of George Floyd, cultural institutions would have had to address the lack of diversity. So the pressure was coming from, from the bottom, from activists and of social justice, but also from the UN with with a report by the European Commission for Human Rights. I think it was 18, but maybe 16. I'm not sure about the date. Saying basically that Germany was in the top 5, not top 3 of the most racist practices in Europe. So knowing this, having the murder of George Floyd and the huge Black Lives Matter movement also in Germany, and having this huge, so it wasn't all of a sudden that cultural institution decided to address diversity. And the fourth factor was the audience. The audience is getting older, getting less. So it's not new. It's decades. It's like this that the concert and opera houses need new audience. That's why there is so many programs for children and for Vermittlungsprogramm. This is because to try to not lose the contact to the audience and to build new audiences. So diversity is actually needed. It's not the other way around. So it's very easy to live without classical music. As a black person or person of color, there is enough other topic to do in Germany. But concerthouses need at least the public. And that's why all the program of the crossover and et cetera. So not taking this policy very seriously, the agent who was chosen some of them were brilliant, like Leila here, but some of them were not. So, and I think Leila can talk also a lot about the great colleague and how is it to work as a diversity agent who really want to change something in teams and in houses who actually do not want to change. So when you don't have the competence and when you don't know what the theme is about, you have to take information somewhere else. So this is a great example for me because I know I'm the source and I was just never quoted. And this is what is it about. Taking the resources, taking the knowledge, taking the experience, and erasing the people. And this is a problem. Coming to the most theoretical part, Can the Subaltern Speak von Gerard Spivak, wrote in 1988. So this is not a direct quote, this is what there is no quote mark. So when existing knowledges are overwritten by discursive framework of a dominant class, actually Spivak's specialization is more on colonization. So the dominant class for her would be more the former or neo-colonial states, but within a society, the dominant class is more the bourgeoisie. Spivak was reacting to 5 minutes. Okay, to Deleuze and Foucault, who had great possibility to talk and great position to talk as white cis male. So she was reacting on that. Speaking on the subaltern, the term is took by Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci. I think it's the next one. Was also. This is why this title is called Cultural Hegemony in Music. So hegemony is, to Gramsci, the term for the process by which a ruling class makes its domination appear neutral by instilling the presupposition of its own worldview, as the common sense of the society of the whole. This is from Nancy Fraser, also a very important person for the analysis of epistemic oppression. So now, knowing this, it was from the theoretical part, so I'm referring most to Gramsci and Spivak when I'm working about these things as a scholar. With a little of hope, I was talking in the beginning about this great conference already there, curated by George A. Lewis, just as an example of critical curatorial practice. So it was almost all the participants, 1 week. So you will see Jesse Cox from Switzerland, myself, composer from Kenya, from South Africa, international contemporary ensemble, etc., etc. So I had the full program, and I will just switch to come to the second one, named 2022. This great pianist, Diana Shahakian, I hope the pronunciation is not too bad, founded the Componist Innen Festival, who will take place next week in Frankfurt. So there are some people who are having initiative, but she's pianist. So this is not firstly her choice. She has done it because it hasn't been done yet. And the same with myself. This is the string orchestra, the O1 winning string orchestra with the fantastic Sarah Martin and some other great musician winning the Tonali Award at Elbphilharmonie. So there are people working on alternative and critical curatorial practice. The question is what to do. Do we live in two parallel worlds when people are offering alternative curation and programs, and then the institution who is changing slowly, but like stealing, but changing slowly. So we need to find ways to come together, so there is no erasure and stealing happening well, so we can make this relation less toxic. So that would be my message for today. Thank you very much.
Fascinating, truly fascinating. Thank you very much. So I'm really, really thankful to Danielle, for that presentation, and hopefully that gives a bit of food for thought. Our next and last keynote comes from a person who really needs no introduction. The multi-award-winning Chichi Nwanoku, CBE, not OB, CBE, is a celebrated classical double bassist and professor at the Royal Academy of Music in London. She's the founder and artistic director of Chineke, a foundation which supports and creates opportunities for black and ethnically diverse classical musicians in the UK and Europe. Chichi is a respected broadcaster presenting BBC Radio 3, 4 and classical FM programmes. Her accolades include Black British Business Awards Person of the Year and is a recipient of the Association of British Orchestras Award for her significant contribution to UK orchestral life. I also have to say, not only is she here to give us this wonderful keynote, but she's doing that about 20 minutes before she starts rehearsing with her orchestra for tonight's concert. So we are truly blessed, and I really am quite honoured and thankful that we have Chichi Nwanoku here to speak with us. Chichi, thank you.
Thank you for having me and for this conference. It's always important to keep talking, but a lot of talking has been going on for the last nearly a dozen years in my life. But of course, we all agree that action is the most important thing. It was great to hear about Roland Hayes, because he's the great uncle of a Chineke founder musician, a viola player called Stephen Upshaw. And so it was great to hear the story about him charming Berlin. It's fantastic. Creating Chineke in 2015 was my response to the pressing need in classical music to make it representative, inclusive, and properly open to everyone, regardless of background. I wanted Chineke to be a catalyst for change, a platform that would challenge conventions and create opportunities where black and ethnically diverse musicians could finally be seen, feel valued and respected. The essence of Chineke is captured in our logo, inspired by a Ghanaian Adinkra symbol that means unity in diversity. You see these two creatures swimming across each other. They're both individual creatures from the same breed, but they're joined at the place that nourishes them in their stomach. And so I believe that every member of the orchestra is an individual, but we are joined at the place that nourishes us, which is our music and our shared belief in an inclusive world of music. This is our ethos and our manifesto. It's a commitment to celebrate the richness that diversity brings to music and society. Our name, too, speaks to this commitment. Chineke is an Igbo exclamation, meaning the almighty creator and spirit behind all life's goodness. It reflects my father's Nigerian heritage and encapsulates the higher purpose that guides Chineke and ultimately my work in music. I was born in London and came from a family who had to navigate a world of resistance and rejection, as my parents did in the 1950s London. My father was black and Igbo from the southeast of Nigeria. My mother was white from Southern Ireland. Their journey as a mixed-race couple taught me about resilience and standing firm in who you are. When looking for a roof over their heads, my parents often used to share how they faced signs reading, "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish." Luckily, they had a sense of humor, and they'd look at each other and they'd say, "Well, 2 out of 3, we don't have a dog." And they'd knock on the door anyway. These lessons instilled in me the power of resistance and perseverance, even in the face of exclusion. As a founder and principal double bassist with the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment for over 30 years, my musical role was clear and deeply rewarding. Yet being the only person of colour in the group sometimes put me in uncomfortable spots where I felt distinctly out of place. At first, I tried to rationalise those moments, trusting there to be another explanation. But over time, it became painfully clear that the only reason I could be treated differently or misunderstood was because to them, I was different. I was the odd one out. Before music, my first love was sprinting. I was sprinting at national level, preparing for the Montreal Olympics. I nearly came to Munich when I was 16, didn't quite qualify. But when I was 17, my career ended because of a knee injury. During my recovery, my teachers encouraged me to take up what they called an unpopular orchestral instrument. And that's how I found the double bass. And from then on, I was drawn into the world of classical music, but as a black woman, playing what was considered a man's instrument, I sometimes found myself standing out in ways that often felt alienating. These early years contributed to the strength and resolve needed for the years to follow. In the classical music industry, we have a real problem with diversity. Year after year, we see the same people becoming professional musicians, from the same backgrounds and cultures. And in the UK, I think we can safely say that we live in one of the most vibrantly rich and diverse countries in the world. What we don't see is that wonderful diversity of the UK reflected on the stage and in the audiences of our concert halls and opera houses. This is what I've been trying to do to change with the Chineke Foundation, to show people of all colours, ethnicities and creeds that classical music belongs to them as much as anyone else. Having been a trustee in boards like the National Youth Orchestra, the Royal Philharmonic Society and the Association of British Orchestras, the ABO, I'd been listening to talk about diversity and accessibility circulating for a long time, but talk is not enough. Year after year, we were in the same situation, and the industry never changed. For me, back in 2014, I couldn't wait any longer for the traditional structures in classical music to change on their own. I realized I had to build something myself from the ground up that was bold, unapologetic, and wholly intentional. I faced naysayers and objections, but also support from those who honestly believed in the need for change. Therefore, Chineke is my answer to the question, how do we convert talk into action? I was tired of being the only one in spaces that didn't fully embrace diversity. I was tired of waiting for seats to become available at tables where we were never really, truly invited in the first place. So I had to build my own table. When Chineke held its launch concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London, we were met with thunderous applause from a sold-out audience. It was the first time in my entire career where the audience truly reflected the diversity of London on the stage as the musicians and composers of the music that we played. That moment underscored the power and necessity of representation. It showed that classical music could resonate with the full spectrum of our society. The statistics speak volumes. While urban areas, London, Birmingham, Manchester, boast diversity rates of at least 50%, only 1.7% of British orchestras include ethnically diverse players. It remains the same apart from the Chineke Orchestra, where you will see musicians from all backgrounds who share a common belief. This gap reflects the financial and societal barriers that prevent many young people from pursuing music, particularly classical music. With tuition fees, the cost of instruments, and cuts to arts education, the obstacles are formidable. Yet perhaps the most visible barrier is the lack of relatable role models. Imagine what it must feel like for a young person from a diverse background to look at the stage and not see themselves. The message, whether intentional or not, has often been that classical music isn't for them. With Chineke, we're saying the opposite. We're showing that classical music belongs to everyone. On the same day that we launched the Chineke Orchestra, our Chineke Junior Orchestra also gave their first performance earlier on. I wanted to give young people the space to see themselves reflected in classical music and to ensure the art form's relevance for future generations. This is not about ticking boxes. It's vital that children and teenagers know that classical music is as much theirs as it is anyone's. Since the murder of George Floyd, we've observed several Black-led organisations appearing with the zeitgeist, and while we encourage them, we look forward to some genuine, original, authentic outcomes that support and credit acknowledgement to what Chineke has started. Here's a little clip of our juniors. I like that.
Next up tonight is an orchestra who are humble, likeable, but above all, incredibly talented.
It's Chineke Junior Orchestra.
Music, it connects us, it inspires us, it creates opportunity.
Whoever you are, wherever you're from, music is a universal language that speaks to us all.
I play the trumpet. I like classical music because there's a wide range that you can play.
I got my first violin when I was 5 years old. Now it's become a really big passion.
I first heard the harp at a concert. As soon as I heard it, I knew that's what I wanted to play.
In the orchestra, most of the musicians are still at school, some are at university, and some have even got jobs.
We're from all different backgrounds, different walks of life, but we all have one thing in common: music.
We want to spread classical music as well and show that it's something that's cool, and show Black and ethnic minorities in mainstream orchestras.
That's the perfect answer. Your talent is off the chart. I mean, where you go is limitless.
I can't wait to perform in the semi-finals to inspire children of all races to pick up an instrument.
Tonight, we want to show everyone what we're capable of doing.
We know we can do it and we've just got to deliver.
Chineke champions change and celebrates diversity within classical music.
We are the Chineke Junior Orchestra.
Now, due to current guidelines, we've only got 10 members of the orchestra on stage. The rest of them will be joining us via the big screen.
And here they are. It's Chineke Junior Orchestra.
Goes on like that, but it was wonderful for them to take part in something like that. In our 9-year history, the Chineke Orchestra has performed at the BBC Proms on the Royal Albert Hall stage 7 times. One of our most profound appearances involved playing a piece that is an annual tradition at the BBC Proms, Beethoven's 9th Symphony. Celebrated not just because of its musical brilliance, but because of Beethoven's deep belief in unity and brotherhood. This performance on one of the world's most prestigious stages affirmed our mission, resonating deeply with our commitment to infuse classical music with diversity and unity. Chineke stands as a testament to what is possible. We've had over a dozen commissioned works by living Black composers. You'll hear one tonight. We've rediscovered overlooked masterpieces, and we've shared countless stories of composers like Samuel Coleridge Taylor and Florence B. Price, among others. This has sparked a greater uptake among UK and US orchestras, with many now including these composers in their own repertoires. These contributions enrich classical music, ensuring that it reflects the fullness of our shared cultural heritage. In closing, Chineke's journey is a testament to what can be achieved when we dare to challenge convention. Diversity raises the bar, it doesn't lower the game. Every child, every musician, every audience member has a place in the world of classical music, and by joining forces, we're crafting not just great music, but a legacy of transformation. Thank you for being part of this journey and for your commitment to making music accessible to all. The power to bring inclusion into classical music rests in our hands, and it's up to all of us to keep pushing forward, keeping the next generation always in mind. Chineke is living proof that when you take deliberate action, the results are transformative. It goes without saying that supporting Chineke is more than investing in diversity. It's about investing in the future of classical music. When you provide a platform for exceptional talent from diverse backgrounds, you enrich the entire cultural landscape. The musicians and composers who have historically been overlooked are ready to take their place on the world stage. So by championing their inclusion, you're participating in reshaping the narrative of classical music for generations to come, ensuring that this art form remains vibrant and ever more relevant for the future. And I'm just going to play a quick clip to you of our very first BBC prom, if I've got time. Actually, there are at least 4 people on the stage, 5 people who now have international careers. Abel was playing number 6 cello, I think. Sheku was in the front as a soloist. Isatur was at the back of the violas, and our conductor, well, Kevin is just going from all over the world now, but that was Kevin's BBC Proms debut. I think something like 93% of the people on the stage had never stepped foot on that stage before that concert. And it goes to show that anything is possible. When given an opportunity, people go over the bar, they don't disintegrate. So thank you very much.
We're going to reconvene now. I have the great pleasure to introduce to you Leila Ercan, who is a diversity EDI professional, formerly of the Staatstheater Hanover. And I'm going to hand over to you. Is that okay? Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Dorothy, for inviting me. Thank you, dear Roger, for curating and moderating this wonderful, inspiring program. Yeah, as Roger already said, I'm the former so-called diversity agent of State Theater Hanover. I've worked there about four years and a couple of months and left last year in the summer. And I work as a freelance consultant now. Today I would like to talk about the experiences and the observations I made at State Theater Hanover during these 4 years, and what strategies we found for certain transformational changes we tried to do. Some were successful, some failed, so it's always trial and error when it comes to transformation. So, Yes, decentering institutional norms. What does that mean? How do we implement this idea? What does decentering mean in operational terms? This will be the topic of today. And first of all, let us look at the theater systems in Germany. It's not as bad as in this picture. This is from the the Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz last year. This was a build that it was a picture that went around the world and people and made people laugh because it's an extremely homogeneous group that you can see there. And people asked, how can this happen? How didn't they realize that this is a group where a lot of perspectives are underrepresented? And this is, at theaters and opera houses and concert halls, the situation is not as bad as this. But one of the main problems is the homogeneity in arts and cultural institutions. That's what we've talked about today. And for especially the lack of diverse workforce. There are strong mechanisms of selectivity in the access to classical musical education. This is mainly because the access to this field is dependent on resources, on different forms of resources, on support systems that only educated and middle class and privileged people can invest in. And there are many, many reasons. I'm not going into that. Historical reasons, economical, social, cultural, educational, the cultural policies, disciplinary reasons. And all these forms are interrelated. They condition and potentiate each other. And the result is, for example, a musician from a wealthy, educated family in Istanbul with a degree from a German music conservatory is much more likely to make it into a German professional orchestra, into the classical musical program, and into the audience than someone of Turkish origin, born and raised in Germany from the neighboring district. I'm one of those examples. I love music. I started my musical education in the first grade, and it stagnated somewhere due to a lot of reasons, and it has to do with classicism and not classicism, Klassismus in the German classical music scene. So what we have here, we have at German theaters and opera houses and concert halls a very specific homogeneous artistic workforce. And if you look at the class socialization, the milieu, it's a very homogeneous group identity that comes into being, the milieu. And what we observe there is a kind of similar to me effect. People end up in an orchestra who are socialized in similar ways, who have similar resources and backgrounds. And this workforce creates a very specific program, the canon, the classical canon. And this is a program that requires a lot of knowledge on the canon, on the classical music. So it needs a lot of, or requires a lot of education. And this starts on the family. There are studies that show that you have to start by the age of 5 or 6 with classical education to be someone in the future to be someone who can do it professionally in the long term. So it starts very early. And this program addresses a very specific audience. Birgit Mandl from the University of Hildesheim says only a third of the population is interested in classical cultural programs, such as theater and opera, especially women, older people, and formerly highly educated, and city dwellers are represented above average. Only about 10% belong to the frequent visitors of theaters, more than 50% to the non-visitors. And this audience attracts a specific audience. People make the place. We all go to places where we meet people who are like us. So also there is this similar to me effect that works to kind of create homogeneous audiences and spaces. So, and the question is, how do we disrupt and change this self-reproducing circle? And the first insight I gained, is this is Chefsache. Chefsache means it's a leadership job. I mean, we had 2 brilliant Intendantinnen, the first women ever since the existence of the theater, past 170 years. There were only male Intendanten. And then we had the first female Intendantinnen, or Intendanten, and they had a strong commitment, and this is the most important thing. You can't start diversity change or change processes from bottom up. You can try do things, but it needs a leadership commitment. You cannot do diversity casually. It cannot run alongside other projects. So it has to be a mainstreaming approach. That means, mainstreaming means you have to implement it in all areas, on all levels, especially in the workforce and on management level. So it has to be top down. It has to start top down. You cannot delegate it to the Vermittlungsabteilung, as it is always done in Germany, or the Communication or Marketingabteilung. As a cultural leader or director of an institution, you have to take full responsibility for the vision, the mission, the purpose, the strategy, the implementation from A to Z. You have to overlook the process, otherwise it won't work. I often have the case that Kulturämter call me and ask me to go into a certain institution and do diversity change. This does not work. As long as the director is not committed doing this, I cannot go and force institutions to change. This is never going to work, so never do that. If there is no leadership commitment, it's not going to succeed. Observations and strategies. I would like to focus on a couple of strategies, namely on the following observations I made during my time as diversity agent, and some ideas I would like to discuss with you afterwards. I'm arguing that it needs a massive, fundamental decentering, a disruption and intervention from the outside to decenter the normative matrix of cultural institutions. It needs the knowledge of the outside, the marginalized, those who cannot enter. Otherwise, we kind of move within this vicious circle of always reproducing the same milieus and the same forms of knowledge, the same epistemics. So it has to come from the outside. And I'm going to talk about the following: the decentering of normativities and institutions. I would like to introduce a model, the DEIB model, that kind of makes it more complicated to work to do diversity, but it makes it also easier because it makes it much specific. It needs reflecting on power and privileges. This is a very hurtful, a painful process, but you need to do this job. You have to go through I always say the Jammertal before you can do the change. You have to go through the critical self-reflection. It doesn't work in other ways. Very important is participation, cooperation as strategies for transformation. For me, it's the royal way of doing transformation. Always enable participation, cooperation, co-creation, because it makes the institution permeable. It opens it up towards the outside. Very central is also practicing in-reach. A lot of institutions practice outreach. They go out and contact and visit other sites, other institutions, but they don't feed that which they learn, the insights they gain, they don't feed it back into the system. So it gets lost. No? There are a lot of Vermittlungsabteilungen, education units that have been doing great work, but it has never been institutionalized, so it gets lost and it stays very temporary and unsustainable. So you have to become an actively learning organization. It is important to build new cultures of belonging, community building. This is very important. Forget all about target groups, Zielgruppen. This is too short-sighted and not sustainable. Concentrate on building new cultures and new communities of belonging. And what it needs is proactive recruitment of BIPoC, and that takes time. Never expect that people will apply. You have to do it proactively, because as far as I know, my experiences, when I asked BIPoC artists why they don't apply, they said, we know how the theater system works. It's absolutely violent. We've had experiences, and we're never going to apply because we did it once and will never return. So you have to proactively gain people and win them over. And this is a full-time job. This is what I did the most of the time. Yes, decentering institutional normativities. This is a hard work. You can't accomplish this within a year. It takes sometimes 5 to 10 years to do that. You have to reflect and dismantle inherent normativities inscribed in the organizational structures and practices and the production apparatus. Danielle already talked about this. You have to find out what is inscribed into the structures and routines and practices of the institution. What are the implicit, often unconscious and unspoken of value systems that regulate the institutional life? And you also mentioned myths and postulations of quality and universality that go unchallenged and unquestioned. And part of the transformation is to identify the implicit and the unconscious and to make this explicit and bring into conscious. You have to do that work. All that happens unseen and very invisibly. You have to make it visible and you have to talk about it. This is a long process. I mean, regarding this long line of inscribed normativities, it's a long work. It's a 10 years work. There is no end to the learning and to the unlearning. You have to dig out and excavate the repressed and marginalized forms of knowledge and the production of, you have to foster the production of new knowledges, especially by cooperating with BIPoC artists and experts. So you have to turn into a Dauerbaustelle. You have to be happy with being a Dauerbaustelle, a permanent construction site where things are being changed in the process of learning. You have to address power inequalities and hegemonies and asymmetries on different levels, epistemic inequalities, social inequalities, structural, cultural inequalities, institutional inequalities, relational inequalities, and personal inequalities. Especially when you have found BIPoC artists who want to work with you. From experience, I can tell you this is hardly ever a smooth process. I had to do a lot of proactive recruiting, and then you find someone, if you're happy, But this is not the end of recruitment. The main work starts afterwards. You have to look for the inequalities you might unconsciously reproduce in the cooperation with these new artists, because cooperation always implies critically re-evaluating and dismantling the hegemonic power inequalities and asymmetries that happen necessarily. You can't avoid them, they happen. So I'm not going deeper into this. No? This is a whole chapter for itself. Usually it takes me 2 days to deliver and convey these ideas. What helped me most was a slightly differentiated model of diversity, of how diversity change processes work, namely the DIB model. And this is a model from US-American organizational theory and consulting. And it's a model I really appreciate because it has a very holistic approach. It looks at the whole process. So it's not only about including people or artists or BIPoC colleagues with different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. It encompasses all the ways in which people are different. Diversity within the DIB model says it's all the ways in which people are different, not because of ethnic origin or racial attribution, but there are a lot of visible and non-visible differences, like age is visible, I guess, but religion, socioeconomic background, cultural background, disability, languages spoken, or life experiences. Especially the invisible disabilities are a real big topic in theaters because we have this strong culture of performativity, Leistungslogik und Ethos. And these differences shape who we are as human beings. They influence our thinking and perspective. But beyond the diversity, there is also the question of how do we organize diversity? How do we include diversity into the organizational structure? So it means that we have to also think about inclusion. Inclusion means creating an environment where people feel comfortable being themselves, bringing their differences with them, where they feel valued and welcome, especially if they are different from the majority. Inclusion is necessary, especially for a diverse workforce, because it ensures everyone is heard and able to contribute, no matter who they are. When an organization is actually inclusive, employees should be able to show up as their authentic selves without hiding parts of their identity or fear of exclusion. And this requires equity. Equity refers to working towards fair treatment, access, and opportunity for all people. Equity can be promoted by identifying and eliminating systemic or individual barriers that prevent full participation and engagement of all groups and individuals. So when talking about diversity and change management, you have to include all these different levels, the differences, the different backgrounds and experiences, but also the way they are treated within the organizational culture and how they are included with all their perspectives and life experiences. There is a nice picture of a dance party that makes it quite graspable how this might work. Imagine diversity management is like a dance party. So everyone, independent of their backgrounds, should be invited. Everyone, and especially different people from different backgrounds. But it also means that everyone should have access. Invitation is not enough. They should not. You can invite disabled people, and they come to the house, to the building, and they don't find an access into the building. So invitation is not enough. You have to ensure everyone has access to the party. Inclusion means everyone has the possibility to be part of the planning party and being asked to dance. Just attending and being silent is not diversity management. And when all this is given, what emerges is belonging. The feeling of being safe, comfortable, and welcomed at the party, feeling uninhibited in your requests, enjoying the music and dance, having a sense of belonging. I think this is a very good example or a good model to visualize this complex process that diversity might mean for institutions. But it also means participation and cooperation. It means also enforcing and strengthening the participatory offers you as an institution make. But if you look if I look at the way institutions talk about participation, I always detect a certain undifferentiatedness. They always talk about Teilhabe, Partizipation, but when you ask them what you mean by participation, is it just inviting, is it just addressing, is it just welcoming, or does it mean changing things so people find us attractive and we don't have to lure them into the house, but they come voluntarily. Looking at participation from a sociological point of view, participation is much more complex than we imagine and than the Vermittlungsabteilung imagine. You have to know why you want to reach marginalized groups. You have to know what do you want to do with them. Do you want to bring them into the staff, the workforce, or do you want to bring them into the program? Do you want to bring them into the audiences? Are they brought in for representational reasons, or are they allowed to participate and co-create? Do they get Deutungshoheit? I never found a good translation for Deutungshoheit. Sovereignty of discourse. Are they allowed to define what is good and what is art and what is art that is attractive to them? Or do they have to adapt to the system you offer? Do they get the power of making central decisions, conceptual decisions, and programmatic decisions? So usually institutions talk about participation without specifying why. And the why is really important. And institutions hardly ever talk about what impact participation has on them. They do not consider the complex dynamics of participation. It's not only about the others, the marginalized, to be included. It's also about oneself, the role one plays in the participatory process and the specific signals and spaces that are recreated in the process. What does it mean to open a space or to reach out to new groups? How do I have to act and perform differently as an institution so that that can happen? So you have to do it in a dialectical, with a dialectical approach, because when you open up spaces so that others feel welcomed, that means you have to invite. If you want to give space, you're sharing power so that others feel agency and power. But it also means that you have to kind of refrain from certain roles you have internalized. You have to define your role in this process new. And you have to start practicing in-reach. Who knows what in-reach means? In-reach. Who knows what outreach means? Okay. Outreach refers to the need to reach out and actively address and include marginalized groups. A lot of museums in Berlin do that. They have outreach departments. There are also theaters who do that. And there are also some institutions who do in-reach. And in-reach means that the institutions have to learn from the marginalized groups in their outreach projects to change their own structures in order to act in a diversity-sensitive manner. So you have to feed that which you learn from the outreach into the system. And this is not happening, actually. Because there are no spaces, no formats, no routines, no meetings where this can happen. A lot of outreach people do great work, but the staff, the core staff, does not realize or does not get to know what happens in the margins of the institution, in the Vermittlungsabteilung. Because a lot of Vermittlungsabteilung, they do really brilliant work, but never really, it's never recognized and never accepted. So you have to start practicing in-reach, and this is an unsystematic process where marginalized communities are given the power to act and are given sufficient resources to plan, implement, and evaluate strategic measures without discipline in order to include employees who for various reasons do not participate in society. So the inclusion process is reversed. The outside eye gives knowledge and insights and power to help the people in the institution who are very hermetically organized, give them support to get to learn more about society. This process brings about a change in the attitude of the institution, its programming and communication. The goal is to have a more diverse workforce that reflects society. And you need to build new communities and cultures of belonging. Reaching target groups is not enough. We need community building. So, and this is a more complex process than reaching out to target groups. Target groups exist, communities have to build and create it. So this is an active process. And it is more sustainable and rewarding in terms of transformational impact. It takes a lot more time because we have to build new cultures of working together, new communities, we produce new desires, a new longing for art by recreating who we are and who we conceive as belonging to us. And the core audiences we reach today, and this is something I have to kind of spell out, it's very disturbing sometimes, to admit that this is happening. The core audiences we reach today reliably, the educated middle class, are the communities we have been building and investing in for more than 100 years by getting to know them and their desires, or rather by producing and catering to their desires. This is a symbiosis that has to be deconstructed before we can change. And this is one of the hardest steps because it means reflecting on the audiences you want to attract and the audiences you now have to neglect for a while, maybe to kind of build a new community culture. Community building or belonging is communicated on various levels: the website, social media, programming, the imagined audiences, topics, motives, the images and narratives you put on your website, the environments you have, the stakeholders, the Freundeskreise. A lot of complex aspects play into this. It is also important to know why people enjoy culture and art. It's, of course, the aesthetic experience, but there is also a social experience. There's a symbolic benefit. People meet up to connect with others, to see important people or to be seen by important people. So there's this foyer dynamic that are important. The social experience is really not to be neglected. The symbolic benefits. The Neujahrskonzerte, you don't get any tickets for the Neujahrskonzerte 5 months ahead of the time because all the prominent people in my city buy all the tickets months before. So because it's an important event, you want to be seen on these events. And of course, hedonism. A lot of people like to have a good night. It's not all about aesthetics and culture and art. They just want to go for dinner and then go to the theater and then go clubbing. So it's a whole package they want to experience. That means if we look at change, we have to look at this complex sociotope that theater or opera houses are. So, and exclusion and belonging have effects on all different levels, and they have to be regarded holistically. And you need capital, economical capital, to participate in cultural institutional possibilities. Educational capital, social capital, symbolic capital. This is the Bourdieu Kapitalformenmodell, which really explains well how people gain access to culture. You need different forms of capital which are interdependent and affect one another. And we have to consider all forms of capital to understand how to build new accesses, new forms of belonging. And it starts with the workforce. Who you hire is who you become. Without changing the workforce, nothing will change sustainably. And you need a different workforce because you want different ideas. Innovation needs difference and different perspectives. It needs different forms of representation, identities, but also experiences, perspectives, systems of knowledge, das sogenannte situierte Wissen, situated knowledge, different forms of knowledge, artistic and aesthetic approaches, art forms, different forms, understandings of art and culture, non-European art, for example. And you need to do your hiring differently. It's usually cultural institutions tend to hire people who fit the organizational established culture. The similar to me effect. It's very strong. I was part of a lot of application processes, and it was so hard to break through this similar to me effect that is so dominant and so unconscious. So you have to start hiring artists with different backgrounds and experiences to add new perspectives and competences to the organizational culture. So all in all, you need diversity-oriented job profiles, descriptions, application processes, pro-recruitment, proactive recruitment. You need cooperations and networking, sometimes worldwide. New forms of access. We had a composer in residence fellowship that addressed BIPoC artists, and it worked wonderfully. It was one of the greatest projects we did. Over 75 highly qualified people applied for this residency. We had a really hard choice to make, and it was really great to see the product of this residency, a new Turandot adaptation by a BIPoC Flinter person who did a radical rereading of the whole piece. So, and it needs a lot of change of corporate culture and personal development, workshops, critical whiteness, anti-racism, diversity and gender trainings, think tanks, and also in-reach formats, and a lot of change within the organizational culture. And one final word, retaining is essential. Retention of new employees is the most effective recruitment strategy. You will not be able to recruit if you haven't successfully retained the people you've already hired. And this is a realistic view on how the inclusion and the hiring of BIPoC artists usually work. Sometimes it's really easy to find people from marginalized communities, but it's really hard to retain them. A lot of them quit within the first 3 months because you saw the list of inequalities I mentioned. This produces a lot of Gewaltförmigkeit, violence, very invisible forms of violence that makes people resign and quit. So this is it. Sorry, that was too long. But now we have half an hour time to discuss in groups.